I hit level 100, so I'm moving away from Whirlwind, and what's the first thing I wanted to test? Hammer of the Ancients, also referred to as HOTA. So if you see HOTA, now you know exactly what people are talking about. With that, listen, I've been having a blast playing this build, really excited to show you what I found here today. And yes, for the first time in 100 levels, I get to use a really cool skill called Steel Grasp, which makes me feel like Scorpion from Mortal Kombat. Let's dive straight into it. What's up, Barbarians? It is MurderInc here, talking about the Bleed Change Hammer of the Ancients build that I've been working with, and it's so much fun. So, like I said, I swapped from Whirlwind as soon as I hit 100, because where does Whirlwind shine? It is the greatest, if not tied with like Arclash Sorc, but I haven't seen any build that comes close to the speed and damage output of Whirlwind Barbarian, but it's #1 or tied in speed farming. That's the key. So once you hit 100, you're not really speed farming anymore. Yes, you could want some gear, but it's doable with many other builds that can also push high tier content like nightmare dungeons or bossing like the Uber Lilith encounter. So let's start with some footage very early on when I first swapped the Hammer of the Ancients before I started testing out some crazy variations of it. And let's just have a look at this gameplay loop really quickly. I went into a normal dungeon because I wanted to make sure I had a good grasp for it, and bam, I just hit this skeleton so hard we sent him all the way back to Diablo 2. So needless to say, my first testing of the aspects I picked and put on this guy for just the baseline HOTA. As you can see, I'm not using Steel Grasp in this build because I just wanted to get a feel for it. Wanted to see the big numbers for myself, see how the Fury gen was, and it was a really fun test. So now we're going to head back to in-game and we're going to talk about my build a little bit and show you some footage of me doing some nightmare dungeons about 11 levels higher than my current character, so level 111. But first, I do want to go over what I started testing. So I saw tons and tons of comments about people saying, Murder, try Leap. I tried Leap first. Leap was good, but it was, what's the word? I guess very clunky to play with. I don't know why, maybe it was just me. Maybe I didn't test it properly, but I really wanted to make this work. Like, I really wanted to make this work. But no matter what I did, the issue is, and this is the fundamental issue of Barbarian, you need 3 shouts. I mean, you don't need 3 shouts, but you need 3 shouts. They're just so overpowered. Damage reduction and taunt, Fury every time you take damage, massive Fury gain. Then we have movement speed, resource generation increase. Like, how do we give that up? And then finally, I guess this one, there could be an argument for it. Increasing your damage dealt 15% multiplicative for 7.4 seconds, but it also gives you berserking for 4 seconds. So that's an added berserking buff, and as we can see in the bottom from the talents I picked, if at least 6 enemies are nearby when I do cry, the damage bonus is increased by an additional 10% multiplicative, so it's 25% with just 1 point in, right? So the list says Juice are 2 main skills, and of course we have the Wrath of Berserker Shout, but it lets us pump out our other skills, and I don't know. It's hard. I'm not saying there's not a build that can in fact drop Warcry. I'll probably try to make one eventually and add a viable third, like, cool synergy skill that will let you stay alive. The thing is, if you're low level, you can make Warcry work without. But once you start hitting like 80 or 90, the build has to work all the way. If it doesn't work all the way, what's the point of even talking about the build? So yes, you can run with 1 or 2 shouts, like from level 1 to 60, 65. Once you hit 70, it starts getting kind of crazy. So with that rant aside, main point, I found that Steel Grasp was really strong. So what's strong about this, besides the fact that it pulls the mobs to you, which I'm going to show you in a second here, it also makes enemies vulnerable. On top of that, we have the Exploit Glyph, and this is the main issue I found with HOTA. When using HOTA, and if you use a generator in this slot, so let me just hit S here, usually people take Lunging Strike. The problem with Lunging Strike is it's a single target ability. So if you want to do a massive AoE hit, you have to use a HOTA first to apply vulnerable and then use it a second time after that, which isn't the worst thing because there's a lot of passes we'll go over that kind of benefit multi-use of HOTA, but I didn't like it. It felt weird to hit mobs and do like small white numbers because they have no multipliers on them just to apply vulnerable with our hard-hitting damaging ability. So I said, what do we have for AoE? Tested a bunch of things, and Steel Grasp, for me personally, came on top. So now we'll kind of get into some gameplay. Now, unfortunately, I decided to record this very late at night when I was crazy tired and I was running into walls. I had that stupid pool that kept silencing me, and it was just a bad time. So this is not the best, I guess, showcase of, I mean, I didn't die, so that's the good news. Like you can see, I'm fighting level 111 mobs here. I didn't die, I had decent awareness, but I should not have recorded gameplay being this tired, half falling asleep. But you're going to be able to see very quickly just how fun the chains are. And it kind of adds a fun factor to it because you can't just throw out chains whenever you want. You have to position yourselves, because like we saw in that last pull there, I threw the chains out and it didn't like group anything up. The same thing here, the wall was in the way, so I didn't group the mobs. So these are all things you have to consider here. And perfect example right there. Even though as soon as I pulled them, the silence ring hit me so I couldn't cast skills on enemies, you saw me just group them all up with the chains there. It applied vulnerability to all of them. I'm also taking the talent where it sends me into Berserk, which is huge. The Berserk uptime in this build is insane without the assistance of any... Okay, and there's another example. I tried not to click on this shrine here, but since I clicked the mob behind the shrine, I ended up clicking on it. So what you're going to see me do here is I'm pretty much just going to AFK until the shrine buff wears off, because what have we gone over in the past? Never do a showcase where you're using some OP artillery, any shrine. Just don't pick them up. So I waited out the buff, so we're going to skip ahead here. Okay, now we don't have it anymore. So we're pumping. Build's a ton of fun. We're hitting hard with Hammer of the Ancients. We have really good vulnerable uptime because there's no, I guess, cooldown on the vulnerable uptime from Steel Grasp. I keep calling it Steel Chains, and I'm probably going to because they're chains, right? It is what it is. So there's no cooldown. As long as you have a charge, and you can see here I have 3 charges, you can actually get 4 with an aspect that I don't have, which we will talk about for sure. But I wanted to go over the gameplay first. Really fun, engaging. When you group all of the mobs up, it feels so good. I cannot stress this enough, how good it feels to throw the chains out and just clump. Look at that. Tell me that doesn't look cool, and it just, I don't know. I cannot stress it enough how good that feels. So now that we did the gameplay portion, let's hop back over here. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to go over the skills right now. As you're going to see with the skills here, I will not have a build planner as of right now for this build. Why is that? Because I'm not going to release something for you to look at as a written guide that's not fully complete. What do I mean by fully complete? The Paragon board. If you know about the Paragon board, I explained in my last Whirlwind video, it's not something I can do in one video. Anyone that puts out a Paragon board and they made it like in the video or hours before the video, it's probably terrible, or a copy of Max Roll and they just swapped a few things around. The Paragon board in this game is tricky, intricate, so many things play into it, and this is the one for Whirlwind. So whether you're fresh into the game or you already have the Whirlwind Paragon from my last video, I just left everything the same here, and I swapped one glyph, which we'll talk about, but let's talk about the talents first. So we have one lunging strike, simply to open up the next core skill area here, 5 into Hammer of the Ancients, then we take Enhanced Hammer and Furious Hammer. Really strong multiplier here, followed by Pressure Point, and this is the thing that applies a vulnerable while you're using Hammer of the Ancients, which, now that I think about it, we probably don't need this. So see, this is why it's important to go over things first here. I kind of just left this on here, and it's likely I'll never need this because Steel Grasp has insane uptime. So I just saved myself and you 3 skill points, which, listen, if you have 3 skill points that are free, you can do some crazy things. So I'm just going to keep going. We'll talk about where I could possibly put these, but I'm pretty sure you take this off of pressure points because the uptime on vulnerable for the charges of Steel Grasp is so high. So we take no talents here. None of this, none of this. Basic skills, we don't have any of those. The next thing, of course, is going to be Rallying Shout, 5 out of 5 into Enhanced Rally, and then Tactical Rally, increasing further our resource generation. And you could put the 3 points in the multiplicative additional health. You could do that for sure. I would not do that unless you have at least, I really want to say 2 health rolls, because, okay, let me just show you. Let's be efficient here, and I'm just going to show you this. I have 9,944 health. Let's see what it looks like when I add 1 point into the node we're considering right now. So 1 point for 5% multiplicative, 10,367. So decent gain, but not crazy. And that is with me having an 838 max life roll on my helmet and a 663 max life on my pants. I do not believe I have health anywhere else here besides the Paragon board. Correct. So I have 2 rolls, which means that if you don't have these 2 rolls, which even on the pants, they're definitely not optimal. The helmet is BIS for sure with max life on it, but everywhere else, not so much. So if you don't have 2 rolls, increasing that maximum life, the percentage is going to be lower. But for a lot of content, this can help you out a ton because you can take 1 point here and then 2 points into damage reduction against elites if you're struggling with the elite output. So I'm not going to do that, but that's just one option for you guys. The next thing, we have 5 points into Challenging Shout. You might be thinking, Murder, why do you have 8 out of 5? As we can see, your item contribution is giving me an additional 3 points into all of my defensive skills because of the neck piece that I have, so that is why. Next, we're taking, now that I have opened up this skill tree again, Challenging Shout for Enhanced Shout, and then Tactical Challenging Shout. Then we have 1 point into Warcry, and this is probably where I'm putting my final 3 points, because look, I click on it once, it goes up 1.5% multiplicative damage for that 7-second duration. So I'm just going to put 1 point in here and we'll kind of move on and see what else we can find. Enhanced Warcry and then Power Warcry. Why am I not taking Mighty Warcry? While it is a kind of huge Fortify gain for you, you fill max Fortify rather quickly because of the Paragon board. And it's a very early Paragon board. Every 75 Fury you spend, gain 12% of your maximum life as Fortify. It's a lot of Fortify. It really is a lot of Fortify. So you max out rather quickly here, which is why I don't value Mighty Warcry as much, and I prefer Power Warcry to kind of pump up that damage, especially for this build. Next, we have Booming Voice, and I took 2 points into Guttural Yell for even further damage reduction. Next, this one's pretty cool. Aggressive Resistance, 1 point here just for a baseline 3 while berserking, which we have really good uptime on, and then 3 points into Prolific Fury, further increasing our Fury generation, because what's the first thing you guys noticed? If I'm using Steel Grasp and Hammer the Ancients, how am I generating Fury? The $1 million question. With these talents, Fury on kill, and my shouts, that's it. How is this enough, you might ask? Because Prolific Fury, and you're going to see once we get to Grasping Chains here, I mean, we'll just go to Steel Grasp right now. So I've been calling it Grasping Chain. I don't know. It is what it is. So for Steel Grasp, we take 1 point here. Technically, we could put 2 more points in. Because look, the main thing that changes here is the cooldown. We go from 8 seconds to 7.6, then to 7.2. You might be thinking, Murder, what are these cooldown chances? Like, what are they? Like, it means nothing. But it's also the charge cooldown that's lowered, so there's kind of multiple benefits here. So we're going to keep it at 1 for now. Then we take this Enhanced Steel Grasp. Steel Grasp also makes enemies vulnerable for 2.5 seconds. Huge. This is why we could get rid of that pressure points, which I didn't kind of realize until now, so thankfully I caught it in the video. Next we have Fighter's Steel Grasp. If Steel Grasp damages an enemy, gain Berserking for 2 seconds. Huge. Again, consider the fact that we have 2 charges, or what is it, 3 charges? No, I believe it's 2 charges. What does it say? Where does it say it? Throw out charges. Okay, so we have 2 charges, and like I said, there's an aspect that will give us 1 more if you want to take it. Or if you're finding that, I mean, this is one big tip for the build. Don't just spam Steel Grasp because you think, I mean, it's fun. It's going to be hard not to do. Just pulling all the mobs to you. It's really hard not to do, but you have to be disciplined for this build. If you just spam it, you're going to be sitting there for a cooldown timer, and it's just going to be miserable. If you want to spam it, you have much better odds if you drop the Berserking uptime, which I don't recommend, but you can. It's all about fun. This game's all about fun. and you can take 1 additional charge, then get the aspect that gives you another charge, so that's 4 charges total. Tons of fun here. Okay, now that we talked about Steel Grasp, move on to Pit Fighter. This is something where I can actually put another point here for increased crit chance, but for Hammer of the Ancients, you have pretty solid crit chance. Then we'd be thinking, how do we get the immobilized, stunned, or slowed enemies? What's the one thing I haven't talked about that's in the thumbnail of this video? Bleed chains. So where's the bleed coming from? So we're going to take Hamstring here. We take the Sword Expertise here. This is our source of bleeding. This is what's going to be reducing the cooldown of our shouts because we're taking the Disembowel Glyph. So for the Disembowel Glyph, I'll just go to it really quickly here because it's rather simple. I believe I put it right here. So I put it right here. It doesn't really matter where you put it. As long as you, I think I swapped it out for, I know I swapped it out for like Imbiber. Pretty sure. Imbiber, yes. So Imbiber was in fact the swap for Disembowel. So if you followed my Paragon board from the previous video, all you have to do is find Imbiber, swap it out, put in Disembowel, and start pumping. So if you don't know what this is, once you hit 25 out of 25 willpower, killing a bleeding enemy has a 10% chance to reduce the cooldowns of your non-ultimate active cooldowns by 1 second. So we're proccing the bleed with what? We are proccing the bleed with Steel Grasp because it's an AoE, getting everything nice and bloody. Hammer the Ancients, one-shotting them, and then we get seconds cooldown reduction on our 3 major shouts, which is very big for this build. Okay, going back here, I did skip over this. We have Pit Fighter, increased damage to close enemies, very good. Distant damage reduction, which always helps. And like I said, we take Hamstring to apply the CC and slow effect when we bleed, which we're bleeding often, which then gives us increased crit chance. So we could put 1 more point in here to make it an even 9%. That's also a valid option. Next, we have Thick Skin, and then 3 points into Counter Offensive. And finally, we're in the final tree. We put 3 in Wallop, which of course, bludgeoning weapons is what we're using for Hammer of the Ancients, dealing 30% multiplicative damage if the enemy is stunned or vulnerable, and our vulnerable uptime, as mentioned many times already, is crazy high, if not 100%. If not 100%. And then of course we have 3 points into Heavy-Handed, Wrath of the Berserker 111, and then moving on to Unbridled Rage. Now, if you want to copy this and you're earlier in the game, like earlier, you're going to notice right away that when you take this, you're going to be pumping damage, but the Fury cost may be killing you with no generator. So what can you do? Since we have really good Berserk uptime, you can absolutely take Unconstrained here, giving you increased duration for 100% uptime on Berserk without having to care about it, because there definitely is an increased difficulty in playstyle if you want to maximize your Berserk uptime with your Shout, your ultimate, and then with the Berserking proc from Steel Grasp. So if you don't want to worry about all of that and you're kind of like in the earlier game, I mean, you can, this is one of the builds where you can go at like level 20. I personally swapped a Hammer of the Ancients at, I try to remember here now, I think it's like 21 from Rend, because I did not like Rend at all. I just didn't. The AoE was too small for me. I felt like I was waving around a toothpick and bleeding enemies. The damage was good, I'm not gonna lie, but I felt like a toothpick skill. So Unconstrained, not a bad idea, and I do know you have to be kind of a higher level to get here, but my point with the early game thing is you won't have Unbridled Rage, so this build will probably feel really good in the early game as it is, because a lot of the Fury generators are not that far away while going through the campaign. I mean, early game, kind of like where I'm talking about, it's miserable for like pretty much every Barbarian build, except for like level 1 to 8 with Upheaval. That was fine, and I probably should have stayed Upheaval until like 12, but that's kind of a side rant, and we're not going to get into that now. So to finish this off, like I said, Wrath of the Berserker, 3 points here. We have Unbridled Rage. We went over this. We have 2 points. What are we going to do? So this is going to be like some live theory crafting. If I want to get the most bang for my buck here, and I know from playing this quite a bit that my crit rate's good. I'm critting often. I'm not struggling with crit rate. I can go with movement speed, because the one thing this build suffers from, no matter what you take, from what I've seen, is movement speed. I can go 2 points in movement speed here. And I think it goes up to, yeah, so 8% total. I can get more damage reduction, which Guttural Yell is so good here. We get 4% from this, and we get 3% during the Berserk, so we can just go really tanky, or, of course, the health we talked about. I would definitely rate the damage reduction higher than the health, specifically Guttural Yell. I don't know the numbers exactly, but 3% may be kind of close to increased maximum health from imposing presence here, especially if you're using it to get 1 point here and then 1 point to 3% DR to elites. But then again, you have to compare that to, okay, so this is just back to the original HP point here. I'm pretty sure that the fact that we have 100% fortify health, if you Paragon properly and all that good stuff, so we're getting 1,000 plus more fortified health compared to 3% damage reduction while berserking, which if you play very well, you will have 100% uptime. And like I said, 4% from Guttural Yell is very strong. But what am I going to do? You already know, 2 into Warcry because we want to be pumping that damage. Absolutely pumping. Wouldn't take the heal because we have potions and we get potions so often. I like to not to go with the 3% crit rate. Should I? You know what? Let me see. What's the percentage here? 1.5% damage multiplicative for 3% crit rate. I don't know. This is a hard choice. This is going to be up to the user for sure. So my general rule of thumb is yellow numbers good, white numbers bad. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it into No Mercy here, despite our above average crit rate. And we're just going to sacrifice the Warcry. If you find out you need more damage and you're fine survivability wise, take points out of Guttural Yell and put them into Warcry. If you find the opposite effect, take 2 points out of Warcry, put 1 into Guttural Yell, and then another one into Aggressive Resistance if you want the Berserking, and you can keep the uptime, or put 1 into Increase Maximum Life. In the Paragon board, we went over this already, it's the same for my Whirlwind build, swapping Imbiber for Disembowel, reducing the cooldowns, making things very smooth. Now, let's talk about the gearing. So for the gearing, things are a little bit different from Whirlwind, obviously. The first thing is I have Edge Masters on 1 2-hand, and if you don't know about this, get 100% increased benefit on your imprints if they're on 2-handed weapons. So if this is originally 20%, it is now 40 with Edge Masters here. And the next thing I have Limitless Rage, because we are overcapping Fury very, very quickly. Next I have is Hammer the Ancients. This is required for the build. You need no other aspect to make this work, not even the Bold Chieftain ring, not even Echoing Fury, but you need this. I tried playing without this, and I wanted to throw my computer out of the window. This felt like the Toothpick Ren build, where I was just, I don't know, the range was so small, it was infuriating. Now I've considered something, and I'm going to go over it right now. Inner Calm is overpowered in the neck. Overpowered. So let's look at it for a second. Deal 15% multiplicative damage, increased damage for each second you stand still, up to 30% multiplicative. So if you have this on any other piece without the bonus of the neck, you have to stand still for 3 seconds. By putting on the neck, you get 15 and 15 and you cap out at 30% in 2 seconds. When you cast Steel Grasp and you pull the mobs back to you, it's like a second, give or take a second. Then by the time your hammer hits the ground and does the damage, you are getting the full Inner Calm effect. This is why it's OP. If you add another second to that, you have to kind of stand still for a second and wait, take a few hits. Could be bad, but I highly recommend Inner Calm on the necklace here. Because like I said, if you take this off of the necklace and put it on a different slot, it goes down to deal 10% multiplicative up to 30. So the cap remains 30. Might be thinking, but Murder, the cap's the same. Listen, if you want to wait the extra second from Inner Calm, you 100% can, and you can min-max and put this somewhere else. If you do that, I think Ancestral Force is going to be a very good choice for the necklace. Because what does this do? It makes this 75% of the total output instead of 50, which means your AoEs are going to be hitting really hard. And if you have an elite, I mean, you're going to be killing non-elites with no effort. But if you have an elite that's one of those annoying succubus who like backpedals from you, dealing 75% of a total Hammer the Ancients hit just may be enough to kill it. I considered putting on a weapon, but I think the others are too strong to kind of swap out in that case. So next we have Conceited for 25% multiplicative damage on a barrier. The barrier is from the helmet here. For rings, Bold Chieftain's Loop and Echoing Fury. What if you don't have those? Fantastic question. You can take Unrelenting Fury. Killing an enemy with a core skill refunds 20% with a high roll, of course, of its base Fury cost. Can only happen once per skill cast, which is fine because Hammer of the Ancients isn't a multi-animation or interaction skill. So we're casting it once, then we're done. We cast it again, we're done. So we're hitting that threshold requirement for Unrelenting Fury. The next thing you can take is Berserk Fury. You gain up to 6 Fury per second while berserking. That may not seem a lot, with the base cost of Hammer of the Ancients being 64% with the rolls that I have, which are, where are you? Just in the boots. Fury cost reduction. I don't have it on the neck piece. You can get it on the neck piece, which would be strong here. And we'll go over the stats very quickly here. But these two swaps for the two we're seeing here, very viable. You can do it. You do not need both Chieftain's Loop for this build. It will help significantly, but you do not need it. So for the next aspects, we have the chest piece, gain a 4% damage reduction up to 20% when enemies are bleeding nearby, and of course we're taking the sword expertise, so they will in fact be bleeding. One thing I do have to mention really quickly, and I'm going back and forth, I'm not using a sword, I'm using a mace. So by using a mace, I'm getting this effect no matter what. No matter what, because I'm using it for Hammer of the Ancients. By putting a technique slot in, this means you get an additional technique. Okay, just need to clarify that. You cannot put mace. If you're using a mace, then you get no bonus. You have to make sure this is different. And this is the only source of bleeding you have. I tried the bleeding skills out. It wasn't working out well, so we just went with two-handed sword expertise. Back to the character, went over the chest piece, and you can kind of look at my rolls here. None of this is per se optimized for Hammer of the Ancient. That's going to come down the line when I start making some even better builds for it. But, I mean, listen, first build that I'm making, ton of fun. I'm not gonna lie, it's a ton of fun. Next we have the gloves here. Rank to Hammer of the Ancients, really important here. Crit strike chance, really important here. The imprint retribution, because I didn't have the aspect I was looking for. You're gonna be thinking, what aspect were you looking for? Great question. The aspect I was looking for, and we can see the allowed types currently here, and just to triple check here before we do this, we are talking about the gloves slot. Okay, so the aspect I was looking for, was it utility? Is this where I was just at? This one's very strong. Eluding aspect. If you have Unstoppable down, this is a free 40-second get out of jail for free card here. So I would take this. The second one you can also take is aspect of anemia, which, as we can see, direct damage against bleeding enemies, which we'll have a lot of, has up to a 20% chance to stun them for 2 seconds, so a free defensive layer. And then the next thing you can definitely take for another bleed source while berserking is aspect of berserk ripping. So those are the options that ideally you would want to put on the gloves instead of retribution, because this is not a stun build. However, I had nothing, so I just simply imprinted this retribution here, and it looks like I forgot about it, to be honest, because this just does nothing for me. The next thing, disobedience. You want disobedience on the legs for sure. Boots, Relentless Berserkers, very strong. Why? Because we have very high uptime on berserking, and this further increases it by pretty much 2 seconds when we have a crit, and we are critting often. So these are all the aspects. Those are the aspect swaps you can do. As far as where to put them, the only things that matter for aspects and where you put them, as long as you're following the slot guidelines, so make sure you do that. Because not every aspect, as you can see here, ring only, helm, chest, pans, amulet, weapon, two-hand gloves. If you look here, two-handed weapons, power increase by 100% like I was explaining before, amulet, power increase by 50. So with that being said, the two-handed weapon, and the necklace, these are the things that I would kind of keep here. As far as the stats you're looking for, this is all Whirlwind gear. I haven't had time to min-max this because the build was just so cool, I had to share it with you guys. You're looking for, instead of resource generation, I mean, resource generation's fine. You can keep this with no problem. I haven't struggled with it. But Max Fury is much better for Hammer of the Ancients. Why is it much better? It's because of Edge Masters. Skills deal up to 40% multiplicative damage based on your available primary resource when cast, receiving the maximum benefit while you have full primary resource. So that paired with Limitless Rage, where each point of fury generated while at max grants your next core skill increased multiplicative damage on top of the baseline for Hammer of the Ancients. So the main benefit, as we can see from max fury, is going to be right here. The modifiers: Hammer of the Ancient deals 1% multiplicative damage, additional damage I should say, for each point of fury you had when using it. So the higher your max fury is, the harder Hammer of the Ancients hits, which is huge. This is why max fury is very high priority here. So defensive skills, cooldown on the helmet for sure. Outside of that, you can just kind of scroll through my gear. It's optimized for, like I said, Whirlwind, but a lot of the stats are very similar. Crit damage, vulnerable damage, close damage, all stats are strength. As you can see, crit, core damage, very good. Vulnerable, strength, core, crit, vuln, core, strength, crit. You can kind of see the pattern here. Crit's important, crit damage is important, close or core damage is important, but with the added factor of max fury having a significant increase to this build, puts it, I mean, you want to get it wherever you can, pretty much. So I know this was a long video. This is my first Hammer of the Ancients video, which is why it was so long. I'm not going to go as in depth for my further builds. I'm going to kind of refer everyone to this video, so we got the long one out of the way. That's going to conclude this. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I look forward to min-maxing these Hammer of the Ancient builds because there's so much we can do. I mean, I thought of so many things after this video, different skills to try, some things that have been working out crazy well. So excited for that. If you want to see that too, hit that subscribe button, like the video, and I will see you all in my next upload.